Welcome to Schooling Life, the podcast where we turn life's lessons into living wisdom. I am your host, Dr. Maritsa Barros, and every episode we sit down with people who have faced challenges, taken risks, and trusted themselves enough to redefine what success looks like on their terms. Whether you're navigating your purpose, reclaiming your story, or just trying to make sense of life, this space is for you. Let's get into it. Today, I am sitting down with someone whose journey reflects the very heart of what this podcast is about: truth, transformation, and belonging. Dr. Silas Otniel Rodrigues Pinto, better known as Dr. Silas Pinto. Dr. Silas Pinto is here to join us today. Welcome, Dr. Silas Pinto.
Hello, how are you
Hello,
doing?
hello. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you. I'm excited to share with our guests a little bit about who you are. So, y'all, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Silas Pinto. He is a distinguished professor of practice at Tufts University, where he imparts knowledge in areas such as biology, basis of behavior, ethics in school psychology, and social justice in education. His academic journey is rooted in a PhD in school psychology from the University of Rhode Island, with research focusing on the cross generational transmission of parenting values in Cabo Verdean families. Beyond academia, Dr. Pinto is the visionary founder of Grupo Ondas, Rhode Island's pioneering capoeira group, where he is affectionately known as Mestre Tigri. Tigri, help me out there, Dr. Pinto.
Tigri or Chigri? Yeah.
He's going to tell us definitely more about that affectionate name. So, through this initiative, he has dedicated over 2 decades of promoting wellness, cultural expression, and addressing intergenerational trauma within the community. His leadership extended to public service as the inaugural director of the Department for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, and the inaugural deputy chief of people and culture for equity, inclusion, and talent in the city of Providence, y'all. Two big titles there, where he works across departments to embed principles of fairness and justice into city policies. So excited. Really, really great work. And I'm so excited to get into Dr. Pinto's journey, because really it's a testament to the power of embracing one's roots while forging paths of change, y'all. All across his work, Silas brings a community rooted lens to leadership and healing. His ability to navigate complex systems without losing himself. This is exactly what inspired me to invite him to our conversation today, y'all. And today we're going to dive in deeper into his story, a narrative of cultural preservation, academic excellence, and unwavering commitment to community empowerment. Y'all, let's give one more hand of applause. Welcome, Silas, to Schooling Life. We've got a lot of
Thank
life
you.
lessons to learn from you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. A little bit under the weather, but I think it's the wonderful pollen count that we have going on right now. So hopefully my voice is nice and clear.
No, definitely nice and clear. You're looking good. Sound great. Tell us, Silas, tell us about where you are right now. I always like to start with where you are, and we can sort of backtrack on how you got here. But tell us a little bit about where you are right now in your work, in your mindset, and in the ways you're moving through the world. What's grounding you these days?
That's like a loaded question with like four different dimensions. I guess, I've always worn a lot of different hats, literally. uh, I find it very difficult to just stay in one area because I know so much of our work is interconnected. And I've never felt
Mhm.
comfortable saying, I'll just do this part, you go ahead and just do that part. If there's a way for me to contribute to that other part, is always motivating for me. So I continue to lead Pangea Arts, which is also known as Group Wonders. It's the
Mhm.
only capoeira organization in Rhode Island. I've been doing that for quite some time. I started it as early as high school because we didn't have anything really learning about, let's just call it non-Western civilizations. So while I was in school, I wondered why we weren't talking about Egypt. I wondered why we were not talking about Africa, about all of the wonderful things that people from throughout times have contributed. And capoeira is a martial art that was created by enslaved Africans in Brazil. So it created a little bit of a window of opportunity for me to go to my classes and learn the things that they wanted me to learn for whatever reason, whatever stories they had decided were important for us to learn. And I said, maybe I need to find some other narratives that explain a little bit more of my history. So started capoeira there in 1993 throughout high school, then went and established a group in college, and then ultimately created a center in 2000.
Mm.
And so celebrating quite a bit of time together. And in that
Yeah.
practice, doing a lot of work around colonization, understanding what that is, understanding the impacts, invisible wounds of trauma that people continue to carry, studying other similar cultures, but also understanding how we came to be, because I'd like to think that capoeira exists, bomba exists, batuku exists, despite
Mhm.
all of the things that folks tried to do. They tried to erase and tried to disrupt, and that just didn't happen because our spirit is just too strong.
Yeah,
That was always
unwavering.
motivating for me, and that's where I center much of my work. I also do work for the city of Providence as deputy chief of people and culture, which is
Mhm.
a department that I helped to establish. It was rolled out in July of last year. I was the inaugural diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Mhm.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging director, and also participated in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice leadership program at Tufts University. I think it's a program you're a little familiar with.
Yes, yes.
And so, I say all of that because they're really part of the same thing for me.
Mm.
When I think about where I am right now, I can't see myself without doing the community engagement and education while also teaching, while also looking into what's happening at the government level, because I'm a resident of Providence and everything that is decided behind those walls impacts me directly. So maybe it's
Mhm.
selfish of me to want to be engaged with all of these components, right? Because it has direct impacts on me, my family, my friends, and extended members of myself who are my community. So
I love that. That's beautiful. I mean, there's many roles that you hold, even though they're interconnected. Um, can you talk to us about how those pieces, like those roles, fit into your day to day life and the impact you're most proud of so far?
yeah, I mean, my day to day, they look quite different. Obviously, the most consistent is getting up and going to work and sort of navigating that space, which is different almost every day. Our Department of People and Culture oversees 5 departments. I
Mm.
directly oversee talent acquisition and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I'm also in very direct supports of our employee experience, which is where our EEO officer lives. And then the other
Mhm.
side of that department is occupational hazards and safety and total rewards. So we're basically supporting all of our employees and supporting all of our community partners. My office is much more community facing. And that's to say that no 2 days are alike. So I come in, I don't always know what's going to come up. I try to have a general structure to keep me sane,
Mhm.
keep me organized. We have a lot of needs from different people that we need to meet throughout the day. And so that part is really exciting. The work that we have done here really is transformative, along with
Mhm.
our people officer. I know today I'm not here to talk very specifically about that, but I wanted to give that a shout out, um,
Yeah.
because it's very innovative. I think that Providence is
Mhm.
going to try to um, restructure and rethink how we approach the work of people, centering people at all of these different organizations, government in particular, I think is really a fantastic direction. Um, the rest of my day, like all evening, I spend a lot of time with our community partners, or I'm over at our cultural center and martial arts center, because capoeira is a martial art. We teach other styles as
Mhm.
well, with sometimes very similar stories. And the thing that I think I impact the most, or where I have the most impact, is in the interpersonal relationships. Like it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but in every single interaction, being as intentional, as mindful as possible about that particular engagement.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean that I succeed 100% of the times, but my goal is to make sure that people leave where we are in that moment feeling like they were heard, that they were seen, feeling like I was as present as I could be, that they matter, that what they brought up to me matters. Even if they're like, hey, how's the weather? Well, you're thinking about the weather, I'll think about the weather with you. You come to me and you're like, can you believe what's happening with our country? Everything is burning down. Well, that's what you're thinking about. I'm going to think about that with you. And
Mhm.
uh, I try not to counter or give advice or anything like that, but to just be in the moment with those individuals, my students, my 5-year-old that comes in and says, "Sensei, look at what I did." Okay, let's think about that too. I wanna see that flower you you drew. Um,
Mhm.
or someone that's coming in and, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. I have an opportunity to do a report on capoeira in history. I didn't even know you could do that. Okay, cool. Let's talk about that. How did they get there? What are you looking to bring to the table? What are you excited about? So I think that that's where we can make lots of impact, because sometimes we zoom way up and it's like, oh, that's the doctor,
Mhm.
that's the sensei, that's the mestre, that's the deputy chief, that's the director. And the next thing you know, those titles can very quickly start to dehumanize you as well. Where you become
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
director, the sensei. And well, who's the person behind all that? Those are like roles, and it speaks to the organizational structure of a particular entity. But I
Mhm.
don't know, maybe over the last 10 years or so, in particular, as I've shifted more into like leadership roles in the different institutions, barring the martial arts school, because I've been in that capacity for a little bit longer, um, I started to feel like people were not seeing me, not hearing
Mhm.
me. They're listening to the director. It's almost like they were trying to figure out, well, what does the institution have to say, and how can I get that information from the director? And so
Mhm.
I
Right.
think that's not the place where I try to have the greatest impact. I think the more we continue to humanize those positions, and understand that no matter where you are on the organizational chart, you matter, you have value, because we've all been there, right? We've been students, we've been the coordinator, then you were the manager, whatever. And then you get to a certain point, and I think we have to put active mechanisms in place not to forget
Mm.
what happened before we got to that point, right? And be
That's
consumed
right.
by the organizations and institutions.
That's right. That's right. Wow. So much complexity in what you do and how you manage. So I appreciate you setting the stage for what you're doing now and everything you're sort of dealing with on a day to day and how you think about it in your impact, not just organizationally or systemically, but very intentionally with every individual. So I love that. But it's like, how did Silas, you didn't just wake up this way, right? And I think that's the beauty of learning people's journeys and life story, because you see those titles, you hear the accomplishments, and it's almost like this idolization of this person and intimidation that comes with it. But let's bring this journey back and see where it all started, right? Let's think about your early experiences, personal, cultural, and I'll say and or educational. What were these early experiences that began shaping your approach to leadership, learning, advocacy, everything that's become who you are today?
Ooh, we you layer these questions, doctor.
I
Um,
know.
when I'm trying to just organize my thoughts around a few forces in my journey. Of course, I think about my martial arts experience with my senseis, my instructors, and my siblings, because they literally become family, right? Talk to my kids often
Mhm.
about that, the difference between relatives and family, uh,
Mhm.
and really making sure that there's a marked difference between them. So there's that circle. There's the circle of just my own journey through the U.S. education system, and of course some
Mhm.
that I had in Cape Verde, and comparing and contrasting experiences. Not so much about what I learned in terms of information, but how the different systems made me feel through that experience. Then I think about sort of the quote unquote professional life, the career, and today I've landed on this thing called DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, justice, etc.
Justice.
And finding myself in this field that's really thinking very hard about where we are as a field, where we're going as a field, because it's a pretty complex, multi-layered experience at this point, based on some very weird catalysts like COVID-19, George Floyd, and what was going in one particular direction, I think got a bit discombobulated at times.
Mhm.
But I want to literally land the helicopter on a particular experience, if that's helpful.
Yes.
Because when people ask me today, because I'm a school psychologist by trade, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
I grew up with over a dozen foster siblings,
Mm.
um, siblings, full siblings, however you want to call that. Um, my parents had and still have huge hearts, and took on many children from the system over my time.
Mm.
So throughout my teen years, I spent a lot of time taking care of my siblings, literally like all of a sudden. And they had really shaped my experience. I actually went to school to become a lawyer, hence my ethics and law interest. And I wanted to be a lawyer because I was going to go and sue all neglectful parents in the world.
That's
um,
right.
and then very quickly walked myself into a psychology class called Towards Self-Understanding, and make a
Oh.
sharp right onto
Mm.
psychology, and I never looked back. So there's that sort of
Yeah.
like all these pieces that influence. Today, after having served as director of school psychology program at Tufts, and then I was a co-director of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Leadership, and really
Mhm.
part of the team that rolled out this first masters in this area. I have found, I think, a bit of a home, because I think school psychology really complements it well. Obviously, my
Mhm.
interest in biological basis of learning and behavior and law, and doing a lot of this people work through martial arts and cultural centers, working with recent immigrants for almost 30 years. Um, and people always ask me, so when did you start this work? When did you start this DEI work? When did you become a psychologist? Whatever. and I can land it on a day. I was in sixth grade in the United States.
Mm.
It was my first experience with schools in the United States, in Massachusetts. When I first came, my brother and I moved to where my dad and my stepmother was in Baltimore. We did not
Mhm.
go to school there. We were just trying to figure out what this thing called English was. And then we moved to Massachusetts and had to repeat sixth grade because they wouldn't accept the fact that I had completed it in Cape Verde, which is why I graduated at
Mm.
19, right? Um, and I remember one of the first questions a teacher asked me. She asked me, "What are you?"
Mm.
And I was like, "Huh?" Like, what? I had no idea what she was talking about.
You're like, "I'm
But
human."
what I've come to learn, yeah, right? As a Cape Verdean, I've learned, wow, we don't fit into these little boxes very easily, do we? And she's probably
Mhm.
like, are you Latino? Are you black? Are you this? Like, are you Indian? Like, what are you? Right? That's the thing that apparently preoccupied her mind when she came to this individual, me, and in that
Mhm.
moment, that was the thing that was most important to her. Um, and I'd like to think that there was way more questions that she could have asked, but that's where she landed. And so I went home confused, needless to say, trying to figure out like that, what is all this about? What was she even trying to get to? And eventually, with all my
Mhm.
pride, we get to, yeah, in the United States, there's this thing called race, and race. What is that? Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what that is. And then eventually landing on, yeah, they really center that, that particular aspect of people. Um, and
Mhm.
I think that that was the day because I remember it so clearly. I remember going back to school, and my brother was also there. We were the only two that looked like us in the school.
Mhm.
They put us in a classroom, which now, as I think back, uh, it wasn't ESL technically. It was some combination of things, maybe even a conflation with children I had learning challenges and things like that. I'm not really sure, but that experience was very bizarre. But that question, that moment, never left me. And I carried
Mhm.
it into my experience in Roger Williams Middle School the next year. My brother and I had a lot of challenges in that school. We eventually left. People were making death threats on us, and then we moved to Providence. And that this conversation about now we call it just belonging, but
Mhm.
this feeling very out of place is very alive, and I can feel it in my body as I talk about it right now.
Yeah.
And it's part of why we do the work that we do of trying to understand what wounds people carry with them. And for me, it was a wound. I came to understand it as a wound because the darn thing wouldn't heal, right? It just kept
Right.
getting infected, and people kept pressing on it throughout my middle school, high school, undergraduate. And then I came into that classroom, and in that towards self-understanding, coming to the point of thinking about, oh, just maybe there's something that happened, some kind of a little tiny cut or something that just never got treated, that just became something else and became something else. And today, I'm happy to say that it's a scar of sorts, and I can talk about it.
Mhm.
Uh, but I couldn't talk about it in high school. Couldn't talk about it in undergraduate. It was genuinely painful because I remember it being so tethered to my educational experience and things of that nature. So for me, and if you're asking about my journey and how I got here, I think it was triggered by that moment and why I so value how I spend my time with individuals and
Mhm.
centering around. meeting them where they need to be met. I don't believe in treating other people like you want to be treated. I think that that's
Mm,
a problem. I think you should be treating individuals the way they want to be treated. Um, and so, and I grew up with that saying, the golden
yes.
rule. And I'm like, let's go to the next level, a deeper level. Because when I show up in front of you, I don't want you trying to treat me like
Mhm.
you want to be treated. I'm not you. And I have very
Right.
different very different thoughts. I'd like for you to treat me as I would like to be treated. I think we would overlap. I think we both want to be treated with respect and things like that. But see me for how I need to be seen. Don't see me for,
Mm,
you want to be curious because you're okay with me immediately putting you in a box. I'm not.
mhm,
But no, you want to be treated the way, uh, the way that I want to be treated. That's just as it
mm,
seems so incoherent to me. And so, um, that moment has literally, and if I'm dragging it on, you can tell how much weight I have put in that experience. It just reverberated through at least the next 5 to 7 years of my experience in school,
mm,
struggling to connect, struggling to figure out, because people were more worried about satisfying their curiosity in terms of categories and just kind of seeing me. And then when you finally tell them what you think you are, they're there to tell you who you're not.
mm.
Oh,
Right.
interesting. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let me walk that way. And I don't want to let people feel that way when they engage with me.
No, definitely, definitely. Oh my, I just want to highlight that piece because I think, especially in American culture, we hear that from
Mm.
many different places for a long time. Treat others how you would want to be treated, and it seems very logical. It makes a lot of sense. But actually, in my research, one of the chief diversity officers that I interviewed named that, and I had that aha moment. So for you to lift it here again, I'm hoping folks who are hearing that for the first time can make that shift, right? That mental shift about treating people how they want to be treated. Like, wow, what a concept of trying to understand others before imposing, right, your assumptions on engagement. But I want to stay here where you are with this because it's tapping into my next question as a moment and experience that's sort of redefined the expectations placed on you. And especially as we're thinking about you being born in Cape Verde and transitioning and that the global perspective around race and how that differs, are there any other challenges, identities, or environments that you can think of that required you to resist or redefine those expectations placed on you that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean the example I gave, I think, is also still applicable because I continue to struggle with those boxes.
Mhm.
And by struggle, I don't mean that it's creating me any significant distress or something like that. I'm thinking struggle as in the way we mean it in our language, like luta, like the struggle for better understanding. I take it on as a challenge, maybe even a welcome challenge, of explaining to others that we simply don't navigate the world in the same way. And
Mhm.
how do you get people to get to a point where they can be okay with actually having someone else with just a different experience and a different worldview? Like me personally, I still don't identify as Black. I don't identify as Hispanic. I don't identify as biracial or white because my dad's Portuguese and my mom's Cape Verdean.
Mhm.
I just don't identify, but it doesn't mean I don't understand how I'm classified.
Mm.
And
That's
I wear
different.
prints on my clothing. I know exactly how this is perceived depending on what neighborhood I'm driving through. I know
Mhm.
exactly what people see. But when I think about categories like that literally can be dated in around the world, right around the 1770, 1775 with Johann Blumenbach's work or something like that human beings have been around for way longer than a few hundred years. And we've been
Mhm.
organizing each other in very different ways. Cape Verde, for example, is not organized around race. Race impacts it, of course, because it's part of the colonial empires, at least one of them. But Cape Verde
Mhm.
is organized around socioeconomic status. And there are many other places in the world where it didn't matter how you could be very, very dark skin and own hundreds of enslaved people because it wasn't based on that. And when you look at even the times of the Roman Empire, I mean, they enslaved people that looked exactly like them who were right down the street from them. And what almost most of Europe, that people that arguably looked just like them carry the same skin tone and things of that nature. So for me, I like to engage in those conversations. I should say, I would like to I'd like to think that I understand the context and the social constructs as designed by a particular peoples. I just don't
Right.
like the fact that, okay, I need to understand your organizing structure, but you're not even going to bother to understand where I came from. Then, that's cool. I'll continue to spend time following you and your train of thought, and I'll learn a whole lot about how you think. And in the end, I feel richer. And you're not going to know virtually anything about me, which doesn't make me
Right.
feel necessarily good, but at the same time,
Right.
that's one
Right.
less weapon you can use against me. So it's a real challenge for me in a place where now in my work, not only as as a leader in the city of Providence, and I'm thinking both in my job as well in my as my larger work as a resident, and then as a director of a center that works with recent immigrants. For example,
Mm.
you hear me say recent immigrants because I don't just call us immigrants because it sort of erases the fact that the other folks who are trying to just point fingers and go, "You're the immigrants," forgot that they were immigrants. They're just
Right.
earlier immigrants. We are recent immigrants. But when did they become non-immigrant and then we become the immigrant and they can do all of the stuff that you see happening throughout the United States? It's part of that both ignorance and ignorance that we're dealing with in
Mhm.
our work. And for my job, where I'm constantly thinking about, how do you support people in a city that has so many different cultures represented. We have over 50 languages. If you're in Boston, you got 70 plus languages spoken in schools, lots of different cultures attached to that. And we're all so
Mhm.
concerned about taking 8 billion people and squeezing them into 5 categories. That's where we're going to spend our time. That it seems like a pretty significant one waste of time in a fantastic way to make sure we don't understand the nuances of human beings. So it is
Right.
a real challenge for me, and I welcome it because this is, I think, how we'll get to the next phase is enough people thinking about a topic, not just continuing to regurgitate the narrative, like treat others like you want to be treated. I think it's
Right.
a saying. I don't necessarily think it's a good saying, but I'm sure there are people watching that go, "What? That's what I grew up with." Cool.
Right.
I grew up with that too. I just chose not to subscribe to it. I
That's
subscribe
right.
to treat others the way they want to be treated. You know, and then for people to be okay, because I'm okay with you wanting to treat others the way you want to be treated. If you want to navigate the world that way, absolutely okay.
Mhm.
I think it's limiting. I think it
It's
will put
limiting, right?
you in trouble, but that's for you to decide. And for me to have that the freedom to also say I'd like to take it to another direction, and that's the world we
That's
need
right.
to create. One where we don't all have to think exactly the same, but we should be thinking about the same kinds of things. We don't have to land in the same place.
Where do you attest that audacious, courageous attitude to come from? Like, who gave you that permission in life? At what point in your life do you attest it to anyone or anything?
Uh, Again, many players. I mean, I found a
Yeah.
lot of strength in my foster siblings who came from the most horrific situations.
Mhm.
and found a way to thrive. Some of them didn't,
Mm,
but the ones that were able to step outside of that box, step outside
mm,
of the experience, step outside of the common narrative, and
mhm,
really look to themselves, look to each other, myself in that context where we help to heal one another. You know, it's one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, the difference between trauma informed and trauma uh, centered care to
mm,
something more like healing centered engagement. So
mm.
you're not defining people by their trauma.
Like trauma,
So I
yeah.
found a lot of strength in my siblings, a lot of strength. We had some difficult times. I'm talking about economic. I'm talking about situational. All the kinds of stereotypes that we had to deal with. You know, very little resources, etc. And dealing with
Mhm,
a lot of things to unpack. So I found a lot of strength there. I also found strength in my not I'll say broadly my ancestors, but also folks like my grandparents. That
mhm,
one in particular who did not have a formal education. I found so much wisdom in what she said.
mhm,
Cape Verde gained independence from the Portuguese Empire in 1975. So very young, 50
mhm,
years here. And my grandmother, even though she probably had very little idea of how much she impacted, my life. I came here when I was 12, and I didn't see her until I was almost 25, and then she passed away shortly after that. So I didn't spend a tremendous amount of time, but there's these echoes of just total brilliance that would come from her.
mhm.
And I think, and again, I'm looking back, right? So this is me using what I kind of know now and then trying to map it onto my experiences and going, I wonder if she was so brilliant to me because she didn't go through the colonial education.
Mm,
I wonder if it's because she just lived and connected with
right.
individuals, raised over 10 children. I think she had 11. Don't quote me on that because Cape Verdean history can be kind of murky. But I think it's 11. My mom's the youngest of that bunch. Um,
Wow.
just be, right? Saying things like, don't tell people what to think. Point to things you want them to think about. Yeah, learn that
Mm,
in school. In school, they're telling you what to think.
mhm.
So point to things you want people to think about, and then sit there and think with them. Problem solve. That's a relationship. Or don't teach children to walk and talk so you can spend the rest of your life telling them to sit down and shut up.
Okay. Oh my
You see what I'm saying?
goodness.
So
Yeah.
when you think about those kinds of lessons and those kinds of moments, I'm like, yes, those are some of the
Yeah.
pivotal moments and individuals that really planted the seed. And of course, when I was her, was when I was around her at a young age, I didn't really know what she meant about most of that, but she trusted that with time, with the watering, with life, with experience, with your own direction and freedom, you would get there. And I make sure that as an educator, I don't force people to get there. You've seen me in my classroom spaces. I try to just
Mhm.
point to things. Yes, there's information I can share with you, but then, like, what do we do with this? Let's think about
Right.
that together because your thoughts on it is just as valid as mine. But the difference between the person who's been teaching for, say, 10 years and the student in the classroom, I'd like to think it should only be that I've been thinking about this topic a lot longer than you. So I have way
Right.
more questions, right? It shouldn't be I know it better than you.
That's right. That's right. I do have the pleasure of being colleagues with you at Tufts, and I was going to name that I love your ability to bring this wisdom into your classroom from your grandmother, right? And it indirectly reminds the students that the life is your teacher, right? Life is the
Mhm.
classroom. So
Mhm.
that's beautiful. Okay, so listen, I'm so that's I knew you had some gems in there from folks around you and your upbringing. We were gonna pull out, um, but let's shift a little bit because I love the work you're doing with Grupo Ondas, right? Incredible work happening there. So talk to us about what that spark was. What was the spark to starting that, and what did you imagine it could become when you started it?
That's I really welcome and appreciate that question because very often it's one of the last things people ask about because it's so, you know, it's how we're asked to think about success is what's the job, right? And where are
Right.
you in that position and things like that. Which is also, of course, important. And again, they're in conversation with one another. Like I'm not, when people say, Silas, talk about yourself, the first thing I say, I am the son of my mom and my dad, and I come from the Cape Verdean Islands. That's the first thing I say. I don't jump to, I'm the deputy chief of this and I'm an owner of the school and blah, blah, blah. And you've seen in me in those contexts, that's the first thing because
Yeah.
I remember very vividly always being remembered and known as Silas de Belmedinha yourself. That was a huge part of my identity, to be the son of my
Mhm.
mother and father, de Chara Sant Antonio, and to be
Yes.
proud of the fact that we were in the borderline slums, but that was home, right? The inside of the
Mhm.
house sometimes was like dirt, cool, but that's ours. That's what we had, and
Yeah.
we're gonna make the best of it. So with capoeira specifically, it was, as I mentioned earlier, because of its connection to our roots. It's a martial
Mhm.
art that was created by enslaved Africans in Brazil that demonstrated what tenacity and resilience really looks like. They took
Mhm.
something so ugly, right? The ugliest of times, and created something so incredibly beautiful. And if you see
Mhm.
capoeira, you're like, oh my goodness, that is a gorgeous art. It's an and it's in movement, which I also adored. Like this visual representation of
Mhm.
power and energy and calling to our ancestors and understanding that we are all very much connected and that the energy is very real for us as a people, and that despite all the efforts to crush that, it thrived, and it's one of the most beautiful arts in the world, and I can say that with absolute confidence,
Mhm.
because I see it to this day. I've been practicing capoeira now for 34 years, and I still go to
Wow.
hold it when I'm injured, and I just go and play music, right? So
Mhm.
what I created, it was to find a way for me to connect. Again, I mentioned in school,
Mhm.
no one was talking about Africa. If you were lucky, you go to the library, grab Encyclopedia Britannica Volume E and read a little bit about Egypt. And even then, they tried to whitewash it.
Mhm.
There were
Mhm.
people in the 90s. I saw some of these panels that were arguing that Egypt is not part of Africa. There are, you can watch, if you're wondering, folks, what? That's crazy. Okay. John Henrik Clark, one of the
Mhm.
greatest African American historians of his generation. Watch some of his stuff. Watch him having to sit at a panel and defend, what do you mean Egypt is not part of Africa? Right? Just watch. So I was witnessing some of this. I was noticing in the class, and no one's talking about us. No one
Mhm.
that looked like us was ever really successful in history. Yes, once in a while you'd have, Martin Luther King's name thrown out there. You would have Malcolm X or
Right.
something like that. When I think about nonviolence education, for example, they talk about Martin Luther King. Cool, but I grew up hearing Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. You know what I mean? There's a lot more to those stories, and there's a lot more connections. And capoeira allowed me to like a vessel to transport some of that information and make that information available to people. So it wasn't about
Mm.
taking things down; it was about putting other things up. So yes, you're going to
Mhm.
school, you're going to learn X, Y, and Z. Here are some other things for you to consider. Here are some other things for you to think about.
Mhm.
And being able to do that at the high school level on our own, because there were no instructors, there was no capoeira in Rhode Island, for us to grab books in every language. I decoded capoeira history in all kinds of languages, even the ones I didn't know, just to learn as
Wow.
much as I could. And then for it to grow into a collegiate space where we were a recognized organization with funding so we could travel and bring instructors and go see instructors. It just opened up this world that was literally locked away for me.
Mhm.
So I wanted to create a center where education and curiosity and
Yeah.
like you literally mutual respect and community care, which now we
Right.
talk a lot about community care, and that's the idea. Taking care of each other is taking care of ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Community care to me is like a synonymous with it takes a village, right? I was
Right.
raised by everyone around me, not just my mom and dad, but they were like the eyes and ears of my parents when they were not around, right?
Right.
And so for me, where I would like to see it go is to continue developing into an institute of sorts, one that really bridges international waters. We have this called ondas sonoras, which means sound waves. And what we
Mm.
do is we honor our fallen siblings from the transatlantic slave trade. On August
Mm.
23rd, of every year, it's a recognition, it's a day of remembrance of abolition, the slave trade.
Love that.
And what we do is we line up the Atlantic coast. For us is Oakland Beach in Providence, in Warwick, Rhode Island, apologies.
Mhm.
We play our musical instruments and the sounds to the waters. And then we
Wow.
invite our friends in Cape Verde and in West Africa to do the same to us, and then our friends in Brazil to play over to the west coast of Africa as well. And we send all of these, our energies of what some might call Yemanja, all of the
Mhm.
energies of the water, all of this, the connective tissue um, of time. And it's a moment of reflection, and we bring our community together. In that moment, it's just the music. There's no words. There's no
Mm.
sitting there with yourself, with your thoughts, and allow. Because I've had students like just standing
That's
there and go
beautiful.
like, "Why do I feel so weird?" And I'm like,
Mm.
"Well, ask yourself that." Like, and then they start to reflect, and it's almost like, I don't know. Do I feel like somebody's trying to communicate? I'm like, I don't know if it's somebody or it's whatever you need it to be, but something's happening because you're allowing that space and that energy to just come to you.
That's
It's
right.
it's one of my favorite events that we do every year. And by the way, the reason why we do it on August 23rd, it's also the remembrance of the first successful slave rebellion in Haiti in 1791.
Yes.
It was the
That's
overnight
powerful.
from the 22nd to the 23rd, which is why that's the day of remembrance. So I would love to see our organization go to that next step. I would love to
Mhm.
develop to a center of education where we could actually have full-time instructors doing research on this kind of work, on language,
Yeah.
language acquisition, language sharing, language access. That's a huge focus of mine, particularly around understanding English. And I'll throw something very contentious out there as the largest Creole language in the world that no one talks
Mm.
about, uh, and
Mhm.
fight so hard to make sure it doesn't get put with other Creoles of the world because it's deemed a lesser language of sorts. But yeah, folks,
Mhm.
English is Creole. Um, there is no such thing as Old English. That's another lie that we hear of. We try to erase Anglo Saxons. Anglo
Mm.
Saxon was the language. What is Old English? I don't know. It went through what it went through, and then English came as a result. English is the Creole, not Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon is the language of the people. It was a Germanic people of what we call England that were colonized by hundreds of years by another language, French. So here we have it. And so I want to make sure that we dispel those kinds of myths and using our center to
Mhm.
do that work and make what seems like impossible as possible as possible.
Wow. Wow, that's deep. I mean, just the artistic expression, that physical fitness is one piece, but this spiritual connection that I think we're so disconnected to, and for some of us foreign when we're thinking about energy exchange, frequencies, vibrations, and oh my goodness, and then on top of that, the languages, right? The history. There's just so much to get out of that. So August 23rd is one way for folks to connect, yeah, with your organization. I love that. And we'll make sure we have all your contacts, social media, however folks can find you, so we can expose that further. Wow. So there's a lot you're doing in and out of the professional realm, your identities, your moving in between grassroots and institutional spaces, organizational spaces. So talk to us, because this is one of the pieces I admire much about your work and how you show up um, in all your spaces that I get to see you in. But how have you held on to your authenticity, okay,
Hmm.
in these rooms? When I tell y'all, Dr. Pinto introduces himself in his native tongue, and he always tells you who his parents are, where he came. I just love it. I admire it. But I'm curious if you can share with us how you hold on to this authenticity, especially in rooms where you may have felt pressure to be somebody else.
Hmm. I'm pausing on this one only because that's as deep as a question can get for any of
Yeah.
us, right?
Yeah.
Um, it comes down to me constantly asking, reflecting on how do I want to show up in different spaces, like really have
Mhm.
an internal conversation. Have it out loud if you have to in front of a mirror, but have a conversation with yourself about how
Mhm.
are you trying to show up.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is really important is the understanding that we don't have a self, we have selves.
That's right.
And
Yes.
when I'm thinking about my racialized self, and I'm very
Mm.
aware of my racialized self and what how it plays out in this country and even in Cape Verde. And the fact that I am of African descent, I'm Cape Verdean, but I'm also on the lighter skin side. So when I go to Cape Verde, that affords me certain kind of privileges, right? To be aware of that.
Mm. Right.
So I'm aware of my racialized self, my gendered self, my sexualized self, my spiritual
Mhm.
self, my political self, my education self, my language self. All these selves are present all the time. I would guide people to the works of Ken Hardy or Kenneth
Mhm.
Hardy, often just called
Mhm.
Ken Hardy, Hardy,
DY, yep.
Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, that does work around cumulative trauma, to understand how these different selves show up in
Mm.
different spaces differently. And so, in any
Mhm.
given interaction, any given context, I'm thinking about which one of my selves is about to show.
Mhm.
Is it one of those privileged selves? Is it one of the subjugated selves? Are some of the wounds getting touched? Can I speak from a position of scar? So I'm always
Mhm.
thinking about that as a way of reminding myself of like where I am now, because as it pertains to selves, those
Mhm.
privileges shift, right? Like for example, my education self or my socioeconomic self, my socioeconomic status self. I grew up very poor. We had those sandals, those sandals that would break, and then you'd have to melt pieces together so
Yeah.
that, and then you're like, is my foot getting bigger or is the shoe getting smaller? I don't know. Something's happening, but this thing is
Something is
hurting.
happening.
And so look at the shift. Like, I'm not there anymore. I'm not in poverty anymore. I don't
Yeah.
worry about putting food on my table necessarily. It doesn't mean with this current climate it could not, it could happen tomorrow, but I don't necessarily navigate the world with those worries in the same way anymore. So what does it mean
Yeah.
when I'm telling one of my colleagues, hey, you know what? We're done. We just finished this wonderful report. Let's just go hit the bar and hang out and whatever. Because $100 of wine is not a big deal to me. What does that mean for my colleague here? How can I make an assumption like that anyone can just go and celebrate that way? Or can I be thinking
Mm,
about how can that self be a little bit more sensitive these days and think about some alternatives that can pull more people into that celebration? That's a
right.
hopefully a much more benign kind of example, but all kinds of ways. When I walk into rooms, and I've been in rooms with a lot of women, and many of my chiefs have been women, and then some guest comes in and they turn to me,
Yes.
a meeting, right? How can you not be aware of that self? And how would that self respond in that moment from that self? Not as the immigrant self, but as the person clearly perceived as a man who carries privilege and is in a room full of women, most of which are his seniors and leaders. And then how does that self speak? Right. So this is part of, I think, that journey of authenticity. It's not just your authentic self. I think it's authentic selves. And it's about
Um,
the journey of being authentic and being genuine in your movement, right? Being intentional with those interactions, owning up when things don't go the way that it should have and you didn't speak up on either
yeah.
side, either from your subjugated lens or your privileged lens. So I think that that's the
Hmm.
work I try to do, because the one area that Ken Hardy is always telling us is we have a really difficult time with self-interrogation. It's
Hmm.
always about, I'm trying to remember his sentence here to do it justice. He says, when you develop a multicultural selves, it's supposed to be yourselves relative to others or in relationship to others. But instead, we skipped the introspection and we ended up looking at others to the exclusion of selves, which means it's about
Yes.
what they didn't do, not what I did
Ex-
to contribute to this breakdown, right? So I think that's the work. You want to be authentic, you want to let your authentic self show up, you need to do the self interrogation.
Yes, yes, and yes for those jazz. I knew this is why I needed you on this
For
episode.
us, it's
Oh
not gems,
man.
it's shells. It's like turtle shells. The turtle.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Y'all, I know. Just pause it, rewind it, play that back because he said it perfectly. So I really appreciate you being able to respond in such depth to these deep questions and giving us some practical ways to think about it, take steps towards it, and live authentically. Because this is what a schooling life is about: pulling out these life lessons from those who've been through it, and you can learn from it and um, search forward as authentically as possible. So, speaking of forward, Silas, what kind of change do you want your work to continue inspiring? Right? Whether it's through Group Ondas, your teaching, your work in the city of Providence, or simply your presence as a leader in this work for justice. What do you hope your what kind of change do you hope to continue to inspire?
Hmm, another deep question. Um, I thought for a moment that I had like the answer, but then I'm like, it's gonna be fleeting. I um I think the change towards community care is the thing that I try to
Yeah.
push the hardest. Um, the it takes a village, the
Mhm.
collective understanding the importance of coalitions,
Yeah.
understanding that you are not and can never be a rugged individual. There's not a single human being in this world that has gotten to this by themselves. Have you seen a
That's
baby?
right.
Have you met a
That's right.
baby? Have you seen how we can barely keep our heads up? I don't even know how. It's like, I don't know how we've survived this long. And I'm also saying, yeah, I know. We did it together. That's how we did it. You did it by
Yeah.
leaning on others. You did it by trusting in others and building trust in others. Because, of course, we know that trust is not something that just comes. You need to earn it,
Right.
right? You earn it by showing up for people. You earn it by being present with people. You learn that it's not just going, oh, look, our group has a really cool thing going on right now, and you really seem stressed. Why don't you go away, go take a bath, or listen to music, or go for a run? And then when you've done your self care, then come back to our group. As
Yeah.
opposed to figuring out how is it that as a group we can take care of you, because taking care of you is taking care of us.
Us.
If I can if I can continue to motivate people to think more holistically, I mean, the amount of ignorance that I'm seeing these
Mm.
days, and I differentiate ignorance from ignorance. I don't know if people know, but I think in English we have two different ways of to not know. We have
Yeah.
ignorance and we have nescience, which is NE science, no science. There's no science to be
Mm.
had. And then you have the ignorance as I haven't come across the information yet. And then we present information to people. Well, at that point, you get to decide if you're ignorant. It's like, nope, this
Yeah.
doesn't matter to me. Tell me your story. I don't believe you.
Love that.
Oh, okay. And I've seen so much ignorance going on that you can see how it's chiseling away at our communities. People are in hiding, they're going back into isolation. So if I can motivate people to, again, move towards treating people as they would like to be treated.
Yes.
You know what I mean? This wouldn't bother me, so why does it bother this person? Oh, okay.
Right.
So that's the thinking of I'm going to treat you the way that I want to be treated
One.
because it doesn't bother me, therefore it shouldn't bother you.
That's right.
So I would say I'll land my helicopter on that and say that
Yeah.
that's the part that I'm really hoping, especially in the next few years. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, we can
Yeah.
we can make some changes there.
No, definitely, definitely. And I can see why that is a motivation or desire for you, especially coming from your roots and coming from a culture that's built in collective approach in community versus the American way, which is more individualized. In some ways, I think there are some entities in America that do want to push for that community and collective. But totally, I'm with you. I too have this interest, and I'm calling it. I've coined it the selfie era, because when you talk about, yeah, treating people how they want to be treated, it takes a level of self-awareness, right, to be able to go past that. So in order for you to be able to take care of others, you have to be full yourself, right? So that essence of, yes, let's put ourselves first and care for ourselves, but for the benefit of the collective,
Yeah,
right, and
so
not
not
of
so not
self.
just like self-awareness, but like a certain degree of self-acceptance, right? To know that
Accepted.
you do matter, you have value. Our work of equity is one that is not about taking the power of people because you have more power, showing it to them and handing it back to them. We
Yeah.
try to remove barriers so that people can exercise the power that they inherently have. Right? This is stuff that people like Marino from, well, the former LGBT Chamber of Commerce in Massachusetts used to talk about all the time. Like, don't just use your
Mhm.
power to show people that you can take that power and be like, see, I told you you had power. But that you just
Exactly.
remove the barrier. You should start to acknowledge in yourself and in others that we have power, that we have value, we have worth, and you accept
That's right.
that, we can navigate spaces, I think, a lot easier than the way that we are right now. Because there's just so much disbelief right now when someone disagrees with you. It's like, huh? How could you? Like, I
Right.
thought I was perfection. What do you mean you don't see this thing the same way that I do? Right?
Right.
If a lot of us also subscribe to, like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Then yes,
Mhm.
if you believe that, then you got to know that it's got to come from within. I don't need to see beauty in the same way that you do. And that when I choose to marry that significant other who's absolutely gorgeous to meet, she doesn't have to be beautiful to you. And that's okay that I have that decision, that choice, that kind of vision of that person. Now map that kind of vision into like social work, into psychology, into difficult situations. It's okay that some people are going to gravitate towards certain things versus another. Build your capacity for
Right.
ambiguity, build your capacity for conversation, understand that coalition building is because there are vulnerabilities in you and strengths in others and vice versa. I think we can go so much further, right? Right. If you want to go somewhere fast, go alone. If you want to go somewhere far,
Yes.
go with others.
Go with
We have
others.
all these nuggets around us that we
Yeah.
just won't practice.
Yeah.
Practice. Yeah.
So speaking of nuggets, so we're gonna help us wind out this episode and conversation. It's been really great to converse with you, and you've given us some advice already. But let me ask you directly: what advice would you give to someone listening who's trying to honor their roots while navigating systems that often don't reflect them?
Oh goodness. So advice. I usually don't give advice, but hopefully we pointed to a lot of
Just
things that we
twisting it.
should be thinking about, right?
You have.
I
You
think when you're in any space, you have to do a bit of an inventory, a bit of an
Mhm.
assessment of uh, of how we've come to where things are. Like, not to immediately judge or throw away or discard a particular context because it's not reflective of you.
Mm.
This is the first principle of the work of diversity, equity, inclusion. Because here's the thing that people misunderstand about diversity, equity, inclusion from my view. Diversity,
Mhm.
equity, inclusion is not something you do to people, right? Diversity, equity,
Right.
inclusion are the things that you measure after you've done things. If you
Mm.
do X, Y, and Z things, you should see a change in diversity, more people being accepted, more people
Yeah.
being quote unquote included. You should see results that say, I feel a sense of belonging. You don't go do belonging onto people. You listen to them. You make them feel valued. You make them feel seen. You let them know that you care, and then they'll feel
Mhm.
belonging. You see, it's not just like
Right.
do belonging, or you can think about belonging in these pieces, right? And for me, that first principle is knowledge of historical context.
That's
So,
right.
any given situation, do some studying, because when you understand the nature of why someone's trying to quote unquote exclude you, someone is not seeing you the way that you feel you need to be seen, that there are some reasons. It doesn't make it good. It's kind of like being in any relationship. When you're in a relationship, people come with history, right?
Mhm.
That doesn't
Right.
mean you need to go through a questionnaire and ask them about every single thing. By the kind of assessment that I'm
21
saying is,
questions.
yeah, it's working towards understanding how did we get here, understand that even systems have wounds as
Mhm.
well. They
Right.
have things that create paralysis, right? And once you start to understand those mechanisms, what Ibram Kendi might call like the cancerous cells or something in the system, you can go
Right.
in as the professional, as the student of that space and see if there's something you can do about it. After I do much of that, I then have to decide the extent to which I feel there's some kind of like reciprocity. And I do believe that we can help shape some of these spaces that we're trying to create. That's why I'm here in the work that I do. This
Yeah.
institution, City of Providence, for example, is 389 years old. Hmm. It was now you can just go, oh, it's really old, then it must be set in its ways. Or we can also look at, well, how was the City of Providence created? Under what values? What do you know about Roger Williams and Ann Hutchinson? How did it come to be? What are the laws that eventually got put in place? What are the battles that were had here?
Mm-hmm.
When did we come into the picture? All of those things, the more you can spend time with that, understanding the background, I think it can really help. So that we're not just looking at a situation, oh, I don't belong
Yeah.
here, and then go the other direction. Instead of like, maybe there's something I can do, not to kind of force change, but to impact, influence, motivate change. Now you're
Right.
a catalyst, not uh, lack of a different word right now, like a dictator of what needs to be, right? But you can
Uh,
actually be a person that is raising the questions, right? You're pointing to the things you want people to think about and then help them navigate that space. Yes, it puts a lot of onus on us, a lot of
right.
responsibility. We have to be the patient ones and all of that. Um, that is part of the work of being a human being, never mind being
Mhm.
director. Exercising patience with other human beings. Like we don't live in an island by ourselves. That's
Right.
so that introspection and the reflection kind of I've been in some conflicts, obviously, with people. Like conflict is inevitable and I would argue essential. I say one thing,
Essential.
someone says something, and then you feel it. And you have to go and work some of that out. And then you
Right.
decide. Sometimes you need to stand your ground. But I think most of the time, when you're spending pointing to things you want people to think about, you'll get the results that are very unexpected. Because telling people what to think doesn't go very well. You tell me the last time someone has made you want to like change your mind
Right.
by force. I'm sure that there are some individuals out there, but I find it very difficult to believe that people can just make you want something instead of let me point to something to consider and then allow you as a human being, as a person with thoughts, as a person who have lived experience to think about that thing and then come back to re-engage. I did think about it. Where do we go from here? Right.
Yeah. I love that. I love that advice. I can see it applicable in the workplace, but also day to day. Um, so that historical context, appreciate that. So here's my $1 million question to wrap this interview up with us today. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I was going to
You're
pass on the
born
million
ready.
dollar question to someone else so they have a chance to win.
So this is gold. That's why it's $1 million question. So if you had to name one lesson life keeps teaching you over and over, what would it be?
I think it's tethered to the question right before. Things are going
Yeah.
to change. Like things are going to change. Life has taught me that um,
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah.
absolute beauty in uncertainty and ambiguity.
Mm.
I so have learned to appreciate not knowing. I enjoy not knowing. I enjoy not being the expert. I enjoy being the facilitator of knowledge. I enjoy not being the owner of knowledge. I don't want to replicate knowledge. I want to see how we can synergize our truths.
Mm,
Right? That's what I want, right? Because we already
yeah,
have this beautiful lived experience. I'm not talking about free of struggle, but our lived experience is a lesson itself. The good, the bad, and the ugly sometimes that come with it. The beauty is in the fact that we have something to teach the world through our
yeah,
lens, right? And so when you allow those truths to synergize with other truths and we create something even more beautiful, again, I can't imagine a world when I'm just like the person in a chair and people just come to me for answers. Could you
Mhm.
ever want that? Like, oh my goodness, that just sounds horrific to me.
It's a lot of
It
pressure.
sounds horrific to me. I would want to be the person that's invited into all kinds of conversations. That's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. That so I think that's the thing that life has taught me most is it's going to change. Be graceful. In martial arts, it's like don't just try to hit. Right? Martial arts is the art of making people miss.
Mm.
It's not the art of hitting. Anyone can hit. Anyone can hit. You don't need training to slap somebody across the face. You can do that whether like naturally as a baby, you can slap across the face. To
Yeah.
make people miss, for you to be graceful in your movement, to absorb strikes, that is a I think that's art right there. Capoeira is that. It's probably why I
Yeah.
love it so much. You look like you're just kicking the air because you're constantly one moment after another making the other player miss.
Miss.
Then they make you miss and then miss. And then you're like, finally, I got you. Ah, that was a good game. That was a good game. A good game,
That's
right? If you watch soccer, is one that's like 1-0, not like 40 to 50. Like, what kind of game is that? But
yeah.
a good soccer game is going to end up with very low numbers, right?
Numbers. Yeah.
I'm not saying anything to the people who are basketball fans here because they're like, hold on, ours is in the hundreds. But yeah, you also have 2 points and 3 points. So yeah, it makes sense. But in soccer, is one goal. And if you play 90 minutes and you score 5 goals, that's like amazing. One
Yeah.
goal,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Soccer
Anyway,
or football,
how it is.
depending
Right?
where you at. No, that's beautiful. Change is inevitable, and your ability to adapt is critical.
Indeed. And
Right.
essential to them.
Essential. Yeah. So, Silas, Dr. Pinto, thank you so much for sharing your story, your grounding, and your clarity. What I take from this conversation is that leadership doesn't always start with a title, and that's been a lesson for me in my own life journey as well. But that leadership starts with this commitment, right, to staying true to who you are while showing up for others. To everyone listening, I hope this episode reminds you that your life, your experiences, your contradictions, your community is more than enough to be a source of power. I really appreciate you sharing your story and your embodiment of that, and the redefining of what success looks like for you has been really inspiring. If this conversation has moved you, please subscribe, share, and leave us a note. Until next time, this is Dr. Maritsa Barros reminding you, stay in your knowing and keep schooling life. Class dismissed, y'all.
Thanks, folks. Be safe out there.
Thanks, Silas.